Silver Falls is a series I have really come to love over the past couple of years. It's an indie horror series made by Sungrand, a one-man studio based in Australia, and it focuses around a quaint little town called Silver Falls in wherever you want it to be. This little town isn't as normal as it may seem, however, and strange things keep happening and strange creatures keep appearing. Every game in the series has a very distinct feel and a distinct style that matches the time period when the game takes place, and the fact that everything about these games, from the visuals to the coding to the audio, is all done by one person means that each of these games is a real labor of love. And while they may be a little rougher than the AAA games that cost $300 million to make, it has a sense of genuine care that no big-budget AAA studio can ever replicate. Ghoul Busters takes place in the early 1990s, and as such, it has an aesthetic intentionally reminiscent of the original Game Boy, which is also why the game's initials are GB. It follows two young boys, Starlin Allardyce and Atticus Longdraw, on their adventure-turned-nightmare in the woods. The two boys have gone into the woods one night to play Ghoul Busters, pretending to be the heroes from their favorite television cartoon, but they quickly find out that there are real monsters lurking in the woods, and some of the adults from town seem to know a lot more about what's going on than they're willing to let on. That playtime has now turned into a very real and literal fight for survival. The game is a 2D platformer, although it's one that makes heavy and excellent use of the 3DS's stereoscopic 3D effect. It's absolutely playable in 2D, but like Super Mario 3D Land, there are obstacles, blades swinging between the close foreground and the background, and the 3D effect really makes these a lot easier to see and dodge. Each of the two characters, Starlin and Atticus, both play somewhat differently. Starlin is slow in his jumps, and he attacks with a hockey stick, and seems to do a little more damage and knockback, and can break wooden crates that can open up some extra paths. Atticus, on the other hand, moves a lot faster, he's more maneuverable in the air, and he attacks with some range with a slingshot. And that range comes at the expense of some damage and knockback. Personally, I preferred playing as Atticus throughout most of the game, although Starlin definitely felt more useful for the last few enemy-rich levels and some of the boss fights. The action takes place on the top screen, while the touchscreen at the bottom holds items from your inventory that you could use by tapping them, and a pocket pet toy that emits a sound when you tap the bottom screen that causes a particular spinning spike enemy to retract its spines for a brief period of time, and that's necessary to get past some of the obstacles. The game isn't very long, but what it lacks in length, it makes up for in quality. There are 9 levels and 3 bosses, one at the end of each 3-level stage, and they are, as one might hope, increasingly challenging. On level 1-1, for example, I only died once. By level 3-3, you'd have thought I was playing Super Mario Bros. The Lost levels with how many deaths I was racking up. By the time I had cleared the final boss, I had died 421 times throughout my playthrough, and it would have been a lot more if I hadn't had items to use. Between the levels, you get the chance to spend the bottle caps you collected thus far, bottle caps being the game's currency, and buy items for later use. And fortunately, you're able to go back and replay levels as many times as you want to grind more bottle caps if you find that you're short. There are also box tops hidden throughout the levels, and each level where you end with 3 box tops, you get a special item that you can't normally buy. Thankfully, these box tops carry from one level to the next, so you don't have to find 3 in one level. If you find 1 per level, then you get that special item at the end of that 3rd level. The coolest thing, in my opinion, about the whole Silver Falls series is the connectivity between the games courtesy of the Code Linker system. Jarrell, the developer, really went out of his way to make sure that his games connect with one another in some way to add some value down the line. The way it works is that one Silver Falls game, let's say Episode Prelude on Switch, gives you a blue code in its Code Linker menu. You then plug that blue code into the Code Linker menu in Ghoul Busters on 3DS, and it spits out a yellow code. Plug that yellow code back into Episode Prelude, and you unlock a character from Ghoul Busters to play as. That's just an example. I'm not really sure if that particular example is viable, but that's sort of the gist of how Code Linker works. Jarrell designed it to be like Amiibo, but without the need for an additional purchase, and sort of as a bonus for buying the other Silver Falls games. Although he has stressed multiple times that he actively encourages players to share codes with friends who may not have all the Silver Falls games. That's especially important now, since none of the 3DS or Wii U games are accessible without some piracy and custom firmware. It's also worth noting that Ghoul Busters doesn't have anything that you can unlock. It, however, can unlock content in other Silver Falls games. Silver Falls Ghoul Busters really is an extraordinary platformer. It's short and extremely challenging at parts, but at no point does it ever stop being fun. It's got its moments where you can tell you're being directly trolled by an obstacle or enemy placement, but it's never to the point where you rage quit. It's always just reasonable enough to say, okay, one more try. I got it this time. There's also this sort of unexplainable magic that comes from knowing the game you're playing is made by one person, start to finish, who is genuinely passionate about gaming and making games that people want to play. It's made in Unity for 3DS, and that is not exactly known as a super stable version of that engine. So it's got some random and impossible to replicate on command bugs and crashes here and there, but the game's got a really good autosave system, so you never lose any progress from crashes. You might have to go back to the beginning of a level, but you don't lose your progress throughout the game. The music is absolutely phenomenal, and every time you die, you'll hear this lo-fi voice saying, "Bummer!" And you are going to hear that in your nightmares. But even with that, the game is wholly satisfying, enjoyable, and a truly charming platformer from start to finish. I enjoyed this game more than literally any other indie platformer I've ever played, and that includes Freedom Planet. And this is for reasons I can't quite put my finger on. But regardless of why I enjoy it so much, I honestly cannot recommend this game highly enough. You may not be able to get it on the 3DS anymore, but if you've got an emulator or a custom firmware 3DS, then you can find it and download it and play through some legally dubious means. It also has an HD port on the Nintendo Switch, which, while you don't get the bottom screen, and that does admittedly make it a little tougher to use items and your virtual pet, the game looks better on there. I think the 3DS is the way to play because of the 3D screen and the touchscreen, but however you play, Ghoul Busters is a great game. My rating for Silver Falls Ghoul Busters on Nintendo 3DS is an A.